Shadows of antiquity. Long before the term secret society would enter our vocabulary, human history was already quietly guided by circles of the unseen. Picture the vast floodplains of the Nile around 2500 BCE, the air thick with incense, the stone corridors of Karnak Temple flickering in torchlight. Here, priests of Amun whispered to one another in chambers barred from the eyes of ordinary citizens. To the outside world, their rituals were sacred acts to please the gods. Within, they were coded strategies for sustaining power, preserving sacred knowledge, and influencing the pharaoh's decisions. It is in these shadowed spaces, half religion, half politics, that the roots of the world's first covert brotherhoods took hold. We find echoes of this in Mesopotamia, where the temple complexes of Ur and Babylon were not only places of worship, but centres of astronomical and agricultural knowledge. The priesthood recorded the movements of the stars on clay tablets, their observations disguised within religious symbolism, so only the initiated could interpret them. A lunar eclipse might be a message from the gods to the public, but to the inner circle it was a precise omen of political instability. Scholars still debate whether these priestly orders were primarily spiritual in intent, or whether their secrecy masked a deliberate monopoly on power. In ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries promised initiates a glimpse of eternal truth through rituals dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. Citizens from all walks of life could join, provided they swore absolute secrecy. What happened inside the Telesterion Hall was never written down. We only know it involved a mixture of theatrical performance, symbolic objects, and, some suggest, psychoactive substances hidden in the ceremonial drink known as kykeon. Even now, historians argue whether visions seen by initiates divine revelation or chemically induced illusions. Farther east, in the courts of early China, secret brotherhoods, like the early precursors to the Heaven and Earth Society, formed to protect forbidden philosophies and challenge imperial authority. There's a fringe but fascinating suggestion that the famed terracotta army of Qin Shi Huang may have been partly inspired by such groups' mystical ideals of protecting the ruler in both life and death, though mainstream archaeology holds to a more pragmatic, militaristic explanation. The through line is striking. Secrecy itself became a form of currency. In cultures where writing was rare, knowledge could be hoarded like gold, passed only through oaths and symbols. A carved emblem on a temple wall might look decorative to the untrained eye, but could serve as a password to hidden archives or private gatherings. It wasn't only knowledge that was guarded, it was identity. Many of these groups had layered memberships, outer circles of initiates who knew some truths, and inner circles who knew all. Think of it as an ancient version of a locked vault, with multiple keys, each granting deeper access. What we see in these earliest examples is the birth of a template, a tight-knit community bound by ritual, a control of information, and an influence on leadership. Whether etched on papyrus, baked into clay tablets, or whispered in the darkness of temple halls, the ideas of these secret orders would ripple outward through time. And while we can never open their records fully, many were deliberately destroyed, others carefully hidden, we can still sense their fingerprints in the myths, the architecture, and the strange coincidences of power that dot the ancient world. Medieval cloaks, daggers. By the Middle Ages, the secret society had matured into something sharper, more dangerous, and more politically potent. Castles and cathedrals rose across Europe, but so did the shadows between them, places where oaths were whispered, alliances forged, and ambitions hidden behind veils of piety. The feudal world was a chessboard, and secret orders became the unseen hands moving the pieces. In the 12th century, the Knights Templar emerged not only as a warrior order, but as an early financial network. Their stated mission was holy, protecting pilgrims to Jerusalem during the Crusades, but behind their fortified preceptories lay ledgers, codes, and a system of credit that stretched from London to Acre. They could move gold across continents without ever showing a coin, an innovation that unnerved kings and popes alike. Scholars still debate whether their wealth alone led to their downfall, or whether they were also custodians of dangerous heresies hidden from the church they served. Farther east, the order of assassins, known as the Nizari Ismailis, perched in remote mountain fortresses like Alamut. They were masters of infiltration, dispatching agents into enemy courts with patience measured in years. Their targets were chosen with surgical precision. A single dagger in the right place could achieve what armies could not. European chroniclers painted them as fanatics under the thrall of hashish, but modern historians find little evidence for this tale. Still, the image stuck, feeding centuries of myth around the old man of the mountain. Not all medieval secret orders carried swords. Within monasteries, some groups preserved forbidden texts, hiding pagan and classical works from overzealous church censors. In the scriptoria of Ireland and Italy, monks copied manuscripts whose very survival would later fuel the Renaissance. There's a fringe theory, ever proven, that certain illuminated manuscripts contain hidden messages, visible only when pages are viewed in sequence under specific light. Secrecy was not merely protection, it was power. Symbols became their own language. A red cross stitched into a white surcoat could open doors in far-off lands. A subtle gesture in a marketplace could summon aid. Even the arrangement of candles on an altar might signal a gathering after nightfall. These codes bypassed walls and borders, binding members across nations and tongues. The political reach of these orders was often invisible until it snapped into action. When Philip IV of France moved against the Templars in 1307, the arrests were carried out in a single day across the kingdom, a sign that the king feared not just their resources, but their ability to mobilize without warning. Likewise, the Mongols' failed attempts to subdue the assassins revealed how deeply even empires could be frustrated by a network that thrived in the unseen. In this era, we see secrecy entwined with survival. Some groups sought to protect their faith, others to control commerce, still others to manipulate thrones from the shadows. But all operated under the same principle. In a world lit only by torches, the ones who could navigate in darkness held the true advantage. And as we'll soon see, not all such societies were born of steel and sanctity. Some would be built from ink, glass, and strange powders, quietly unlocking the secrets of the natural world while guarding them from the uninitiated, the Alchemists' circle. By the late Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, a new kind of secret society emerged, one less concerned with swords and more with the mysteries of matter itself. Alchemy, that strange fusion of science, philosophy, and mysticism, became the private language of scholars who sought to turn lead into gold, cure every illness, and perhaps most audaciously, discover the secret of eternal life. Picture a candlelit chamber in 15th century Prague. Glass alembics hiss gently over flickering flames, powders are ground with deliberate care, and strange symbols, circles, serpents, suns, are inked into the margins of parchment. The alchemists worked in isolation or in tightly knit circles, bound not just by curiosity, but by the fear of persecution. In an age when the Church still cast a wary eye over unorthodox inquiry, too much openness could mean charges of heresy. Scholars still debate whether the secrecy was primarily to protect themselves from religious authorities or to guard lucrative discoveries from rivals. These circles were often transnational. An Italian scholar might send an encrypted letter to a French colleague, the contents disguised in allegory. Gold was never just gold. In alchemical texts, it could mean perfection, enlightenment, or even divine grace. Some manuscripts appear almost nonsensical until decoded, recipes that call for the tears of the moon or the breath of a sleeping lion. Fringe researchers have long speculated that these poetic disguises sometimes hid the use of dangerous or even forbidden substances, though mainstream historians remain cautious about such claims. Royal courts frequently became patrons to these secretive experimenters. The Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, ruling from Prague in the late 16th century, filled his court with astrologers, magicians, and alchemists, turning the city into a hub of occult learning. Of his guests was the Englishman John Dee, mathematician, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and rumoured conjurer of spirits. Dee and his associate Edward Kelly claimed to communicate with angels through a special Enochian language, recording visions that some believed offered both divine wisdom and political guidance. Whether the pair were mystics, frauds, or something in between is still fiercely debated. The secrecy of alchemical societies was reinforced by elaborate initiation rituals. A novice might be asked to memorize long strings of arcane symbols or to perform chemical demonstrations in front of elders. Failure could mean exclusion. Success brought deeper access to guarded texts. And just like the layered memberships of ancient priesthoods, only the highest adepts were trusted with the great work, the ultimate transformation. Alchemical imagery even crept into public art and architecture, hidden in plain sight. Stone carvings of intertwined dragons or cryptic geometric patterns on cathedral walls may have served as quiet nods between those in the know. Some scholars suggest that certain stained glass windows doubled as instructional diagrams for initiates, their meaning invisible to parishioners but obvious to a trained alchemist's eye. Though the dream of transmuting base metals into gold was never realized in the literal sense, the discipline left a legacy far greater than any pile of coins. Through their experiments, alchemists advanced glassmaking, metallurgy, and the distillation of medicines, paving the way for modern chemistry. Yet their methods, guarded, encoded, and exclusive, kept their circles cloaked in the air of the forbidden. It's tempting to think of them as eccentric tinkerers, but in their secrecy lay something profoundly political, the belief that knowledge itself was power, and that not all hands were fit to wield it. This philosophy would echo through the next great wave of societies, ones that swapped the crucible for the compass and the furnace for the square and level, quietly building a brotherhood that would span continents. Freemasons rising. By the dawn of the 18th century, Europe was entering an age of revolutions in science, politics, and thought, and one fraternity seemed to stand quietly at its crossroads. The Freemasons, who traced their symbolic lineage to the medieval stonemasons' guilds, evolved into a network of lodges, bound not by labour but by ideals, fraternity, moral philosophy, and the shared language of symbols. Step into a London coffee house in 1717. Smoke curls through the air, mingling with the aroma of roasted beans. 4 lodges meet in secret to form the first Grand Lodge of England. On the surface, it is a society of gentlemen who gather for ritual and fellowship. Beneath, it is a system of coded signs, moral allegories, and quiet influence. The working tools of the Mason, the square, the compass, the plumb line, become metaphors for living a virtuous life. But to the outsider, their very secrecy invites suspicion. Membership cuts across borders and classes. Masons could be merchants, scientists, nobles, or even kings. George Washington wore Masonic regalia at cornerstone ceremonies. Mozart composed music layered with Masonic symbolism. Lodges provided safe spaces for political discussion at a time when governments censored dissent. Scholars still debate whether these conversations directly fueled revolutions like the American and French, or whether they merely provided the philosophical groundwork. The rituals were, and remain, carefully guarded. Candidates passed through degrees, each unveiling more of the society's allegorical truths. Passwords, handshakes, and ciphered writings ensured that only the initiated could participate fully. Some fringe theorists claim that the Freemasons inherited hidden knowledge from the Templars or even from the builders of Solomon's Temple, ideas that mainstream historians dismiss as romantic invention. Still, the persistence of such myths speaks to the order's mastery of mystique. Freemasonry's spread was swift. Lodges sprouted in colonial outposts, from the Caribbean to India, creating a global network long before the term existed. Within them, members debated the rights of man, the limits of monarchy, and the duties of citizenship. This blend of fraternity and political discourse made them both respected and feared. In some countries, rulers welcomed Masonic patronage. In others, they banned it outright, fearing conspiracy. The power of symbols was central to their identity. A Masonic square carved discreetly into a building's cornerstone could be a silent declaration of values to those who recognized it. Architecture itself became a language. Even the layout of lodge rooms echoed the symbolic map of a temple, reinforcing the idea that each meeting was a sacred reconstruction of timeless truths. Yet the Masons were careful to present themselves as apolitical. Publicly, they were a charitable fraternity. Privately, they fostered bonds of trust that transcended national rivalries. When war broke out, it was not unheard of for enemy officers, recognizing one another as Masons, to show mercy on the battlefield. This balancing act between public benevolence and private ritual allowed the Freemasons to thrive for centuries, but it also ensured that whispers of deeper agendas never faded. By the late 18th century, those whispers would take a more radical form, as a new group emerged in Bavaria claiming to perfect the ideals of reason and liberty, but with ambitions that would soon draw the wrath of princes and popes alike. The Illuminati spark. In the spring of 1776, as revolutions simmered across the Atlantic, a different kind of rebellion took root in the Bavarian city of Ingolstadt. Adam Weishaupt, a 28-year-old professor of canon law, looked at the world of princes, bishops, and inherited privilege and saw an edifice ripe for dismantling. He imagined a brotherhood dedicated to reason, free thought, and the separation of church and state, a society that could infiltrate the old order from within and remake it according to Enlightenment ideals. He called it the Order of the Illuminati. At first, the Illuminati was modest, just a handful of students and sympathetic intellectuals meeting in secret, their discussions wrapped in layers of allegory. But Weishaupt was ambitious. He borrowed the structure of older secret orders, hierarchical degrees, code names, encrypted correspondence, and married it to a program of radical reform. Members were to influence political leaders subtly, steer public opinion quietly, and plant the seeds of a new, rational society. Scholars still debate whether this agenda was truly achievable or merely the utopian daydream of a restless professor. The Illuminati's recruitment strategy was cunning. Rather than recruit en masse, they sought individuals already inside other lodges and circles, especially Freemason lodges. By joining those groups and winning trust, they could guide their decisions from within. To the casual observer, an Illuminatus looked like any other lodge brother. To those in the know, he carried an entirely different set of loyalties. Within a decade, the order counted influential nobles, officers, and academics among its ranks. Their membership included the likes of diplomat Xavier von Zwack and writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Though Goethe's exact involvement remains a matter of scholarly debate, the spread was rapid enough to alarm Bavarian authorities. In 1784, Elector Karl Theodor issued an edict banning all secret societies, naming the Illuminati directly. Fringe theories flourish in the gaps left by their suppression. Some claim the Illuminati survived underground, influencing the French Revolution, the rise of secular states, and even 20th century geopolitics. Mainstream historians tend to see the order as short-lived, collapsing under government pressure and internal disputes. But the mythology, helped along by a suspiciously complete set of seized documents, proved far more enduring than the organisation itself. Part of their mystique lies in their emblem, the eye within a triangle, radiating light. Though this symbol predates the Illuminati, appearing in Christian art as the Eye of Providence, its later association with hidden power has become nearly inseparable from the group. Some even point to its presence on the US dollar bill as evidence of lasting influence, though this connection is historically unproven. What is certain is that the Illuminati crystallized the idea of the modern political secret society, a network that was not just about guarding knowledge, but about strategically shaping the world according to a philosophy. Whether they succeeded or not, they left behind a template that others would adapt, fear, and imitate. In the century that followed, the hunger for hidden wisdom would merge with another current, the revival of mystical and occult traditions. And in the genteel drawing rooms of Victorian London and Paris, a new breed of society would rise, one where candlelit seances and ancient grimoires were as central as political reform. The occult revival. The 19th century was a paradoxical age. Industry roared, steamships crossed oceans, and telegraphs pulsed with instant communication. Yet in the midst of all this modernity, a deep fascination with the mystical resurfaced. Across Europe and America, parlours and drawing rooms became theatres of the unseen, where spiritualism, ancient magic, and Eastern philosophies found new, fashionable audiences. This was the era of the occult revival, and with it came a fresh wave of secret societies whose rituals blended candlelight, incense, and esoteric texts. One of the most influential was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in London in 1887 by 3 Freemasons with an appetite for the arcane. Drawing from alchemy, Kabbalah, Egyptian symbolism, and medieval grimoires, the Golden Dawn offered a structured path of initiation through a hierarchy of grades. Members wore robes of specific colours, recited invocations, and performed ceremonies meant to invoke angels or explore the astral plane. Scholars still debate whether these rituals were intended as genuine magical acts or as elaborate psychological dramas for self-transformation. The Golden Dawn attracted a heady mix of writers, artists, and thinkers, people like the Irish poet W.B. Yeats, who saw in its teachings a way to reconcile art and spirituality. The group's secrecy was reinforced by elaborate oaths, sworn under penalty of symbolic death. A breach of confidence could mean public disgrace, or worse, expulsion into the mundane world with one's mystical ambitions cut short. Beyond Britain, the Theosophical Society, founded in New York in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky, blended Western occultism with Hindu and Buddhist philosophies. Meetings often hinted at hidden masters dwelling in Tibet or other remote lands, guiding human evolution from afar. Mainstream historians generally regard these claims as allegorical, but fringe adherents insist there were real flesh and blood adepts behind the scenes. Victorian spiritualism added its own layer of secrecy. Mediums conducted seances in darkened rooms, speaking in hushed tones to summon the voices of the dead. While some were exposed as frauds, using hidden assistants or clever stagecraft, others left behind testimonies so compelling they remain debated today. Even public seances had their private counterpart, exclusive gatherings for the well-connected, where messages from the other side were supposedly more candid, and where political or personal advice might be slipped in alongside words of comfort. The symbolism of these societies was rich and deliberate. Golden Dawn temples were arranged according to the Tree of Life from Kabbalistic tradition. Theosophical gatherings might display Eastern mandalas or portraits of mysterious ascended masters. Even the decor became a kind of coded text, legible only to those initiated into its meanings. Fringe theories have suggested that these mystical orders were not just exploring the unseen, but subtly influencing the political and artistic climate of their day, placing initiates in positions where they could sway public taste, literary movements, or even policy. Scholars are cautious with such claims, noting the overlap between social circles of artists, politicians, and mystics in the fin de siècle world. By the turn of the 20th century, these groups had set a precedent for blending the esoteric with the modern. They created a model where secret ritual could coexist with public respectability, where a banker or barrister might don a robe by night and invoke the gods of Egypt without risking social exile. And in this fertile ground of secrecy, symbolism, and influence, the stage was set for another transformation, when secret societies would once again step from mysticism into the arches, or mechanics of revolution and power. Revolution in the shadows. The 20th century dawned with empires sprawling across continents, but beneath the glittering surface of kings and parliaments, secret societies were quietly writing a different script. These were not merely circles of mystics or philosophers. They were political engines, organized to spark uprisings, topple regimes, and redraw maps. In many cases, their influence was invisible until the day their plans erupted into the streets. One of the most striking examples was the Carbonari in 19th century Italy, whose structure and methods carried over into the next century. Originally formed to resist Napoleonic rule, they became a crucible for nationalist movements. Meetings were cloaked in elaborate ritual. Members swore oaths before symbolic altars, their identities hidden behind aliases. The symbolism, charcoal burners at work, was innocuous enough to outsiders, but to initiates, it marked a brotherhood sworn to political change. Scholars still debate whether their real strength lay in their rituals or in their extensive underground networks across the Italian peninsula. In the Balkans, the early 1900s saw the rise of the Black Hand, a Serbian secret military society bent on freeing Slavic territories from Austro-Hungarian control. Their methods were ruthlessly direct, smuggling arms, training insurgents, and coordinating assassinations. It was a Black Hand member, Gavrilo Princip, who in 1914 fired the shots that killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, an act that lit the fuse of World War I. Whether the group intended to start a global conflict is still fiercely debated. Some historians see it as a calculated risk gone catastrophically wrong, others as a tragic misstep by a local conspiracy. Across the Atlantic, the Mexican Revolution drew on its own shadow networks. The Magonistas, followers of the anarchist Ricardo Flores Magón, operated in cells that communicated in code, slipping manifestos across borders to ignite rebellion against the Diaz regime. While their influence is often overshadowed by more visible revolutionary leaders, fringe historians argue that their early propaganda planted the seeds for Mexico's broader social upheaval. Even anti-colonial movements in Asia and Africa sometimes cloaked themselves in the trappings of secret societies. In British-controlled Malaya, the Hui secret societies, with roots in Chinese fraternal organizations, became both mutual aid groups and political actors, their rituals doubling as recruitment tools for resistance. Secrecy in these contexts served both practical and psychological purposes. Practically, it shielded members from police infiltration. Psychologically, it bound them together with a sense of shared destiny. A clandestine meeting in a candle-lit basement, the quiet passing of a coded note, or the touch of a concealed emblem on a lapel, all could reinforce the belief that they were part of something larger than themselves. Fringe speculation sometimes blurs the lines between documented history and conspiracy. Some suggest that the revolutions of the early 20th century, from the Russian Bolshevik seizure of power to uprisings in colonial territories, were quietly coordinated by a network of international lodges, each using different names but sharing a common aim. Mainstream scholarship tends to dismiss such sweeping theories, but acknowledges that revolutionary leaders often borrowed organizational ideas from older secret orders. What is clear is that these groups wielded secrecy as both shield and sword. In an age of telegraphs and newspapers, when information could travel faster than ever, they mastered the art of keeping the most dangerous knowledge hidden until the precise moment it was needed. And as the century advanced, the tactics of secrecy would evolve again. No longer confined to cellars or candlelit lodges, the new breed of hidden networks would operate within boardrooms, think tanks, and informal gatherings of the powerful, wearing the face of legitimacy while carrying forward the oldest traditions of the unseen. The modern veil. By the mid-20th century, the world's map had been redrawn by wars, revolutions, and decolonization. Empires had fallen, but secrecy had not. In fact, the modern age provided secret societies with unprecedented tools, instant communication, global finance, and vast bureaucracies in which influence could hide in plain sight. The lodges and candlelit rituals of earlier centuries gave way, at least on the surface, to more polished settings, private clubs, international conferences, and charitable foundations whose public image masked discrete networks of mutual interest. One of the most discussed examples is the Bilderberg Group, first convened in 1954 in the Netherlands. Officially, it is an annual meeting of political leaders, corporate executives, and academics to foster dialogue between Europe and North America. Unofficially, its closed-door policy has fueled decades of speculation about backroom deals shaping global policy. Scholars still debate whether such gatherings truly set the course of international affairs, or whether their secrecy simply magnifies their perceived power. Similarly, the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States and the Trilateral Commission have been cast, by critics and admirers alike, as heirs to the discreet influence of historical secret orders. Their rosters often include heads of state, central bankers, and media magnates. No oaths or arcane symbols are required, but the effect can be similar: a trusted inner circle, bound by shared interests and inaccessible to the general public. In some cases, older societies have adapted rather than vanished. Freemasonry persists, though its rituals are more transparent, its membership often public. Yet within its global framework, there remain inner orders whose workings are less openly discussed. Fringe theories claim that such subgroups maintain the true lineage of esoteric knowledge passed down from the Templars or Alchemists. Mainstream historians tend to view these as romantic survivals rather than operational centers of power, but as ever, the lack of evidence leaves room for imagination. Technology has also birthed new forms of secrecy. Online forums, encrypted messaging apps, and digital currencies have allowed ideologically driven networks to organize across continents without ever meeting face to face. While many are ephemeral, others form tight-knit communities with initiation processes, codes, and insider jargon eerily reminiscent of their medieval and Renaissance predecessors. The blending of secrecy and legitimacy is perhaps the defining feature of the modern veil. A discreet handshake in a luxury hotel lobby may not look like the passing of a dagger in a dark alley, yet both can carry the same weight of alliance. In an age where surveillance is pervasive, the most effective secret societies are those that appear to have nothing to hide, yet subtly direct resources, opportunities, and narratives behind the scenes. Even the symbols endure. A pyramid on a banknote, a stylized eye in a corporate logo, or a recurring motif in architecture can spark whispers of hidden hands at work. Are these deliberate nods to an unbroken tradition of covert influence, or simply the human tendency to find patterns where none exist? Scholars still debate the answer. As the 21st century unfolds, The line between conspiracy theory and verifiable history remains thin. What is certain is that the impulse toward secrecy, toward belonging to a trusted few who hold knowledge or influence beyond the reach of the many, has not faded. It has only adapted, wearing new masks to suit new ages, and just as in the temples of Karnak or the lodges of Enlightenment London, the real work often happens out of sight, leaving the rest of us to read the signs and wonder how much of the world's story is still written in the shadows. Conclusion. From the incense-filled halls of ancient temples to the polished boardrooms of the modern elite, the arc of secret societies runs unbroken through history. Their forms have shifted, robes traded for suits, coded scrolls for encrypted messages, but their essence remains: guarded knowledge, selective membership, and influence exercised beyond public scrutiny. Some have pursued noble aims, preserving wisdom or defending freedoms. Others have schemed for domination or personal gain. Many lived in the grey space between, where idealism and ambition intertwine. The symbols, rituals, and myths they left behind still speak to us, blurring the line between fact and legend. And so, the question endures: do these societies shape the world, or merely reflect the forces already at play? We may never know the full answer. What is certain is that wherever power gathers, shadows gather too, and within them the whisper of the initiated still lingers,